It's Monday night, and you know what that means. Jersey First TV proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk, and I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, Top 50 Latino, as voted on by the Latino Spirit Online magazine. Certainly the weapon of mass disruption in Garden State media, and without a doubt, folks, the people's choice and the people's voice. Yes, it's me, Fernando Uribe. Happy Monday, everyone. I want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so tonight on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also via the Jersey First YouTube page. And folks, August is really just flying by. And I don't know about you, but I'm excited about the fall, not just about back to school, but of course, folks, the NFL. I'm excited about my Cowboys, even though they break my heart every year. Just got to say, I'm waiting for the leaves to change a little bit, Halloween, all the good stuff that comes with the fall weather. I'm over the summer heat, folks, without a doubt. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you check out Jersey First and yours truly on all of our social media platforms. Of course, make sure you like Facebook, obviously, Jersey First TV, and of course, Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Don't forget to follow Jersey First on YouTube, on Instagram and Twitter, as well as my own Instagram and Twitter, and also on the YouTube page, folks. It takes 2 seconds. Click the subscribe button and watch Jersey First wherever you watch YouTube. And of course, during these summer months, maybe you're driving down the shore. Maybe you're going down to, Martell's for Tiki Monday. Maybe you're going down to help your kids move back onto campus. Maybe you're just doing grocery shopping. Maybe you're visiting that in-law you just can't stand. Whatever it is, folks, I'm sure you're driving or taking mass transit or Uber or Lyft perhaps. Hey, wherever you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First and take all the great programming that we bring you every single week. And I always make it a point, ladies and gentlemen, to express how privileged I feel to be on the dream team of Garden State Media. Folks, that's right. It's Jersey First TV, always educating, advocating for the people of New Jersey. We do it every single week. Of course, brand new episodes of The Nader Narrative, hosted by the incredible Elizabeth Nader, premiere every Thursday, of course, on Facebook Live via StreamYard, and also on the Jersey First YouTube page, as well as brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap with AJ Malilo and Stephen Rombolo, also on Thursdays. And of course, you can check out Real Talk with Fernando Uribe live every Monday night right here, once again, via Facebook Live on StreamYard, also on the Jersey First YouTube page, as well as LinkedIn, and of course, on Spotify and SoundCloud. Folks, you definitely want to stick around for final thoughts because I have a lot to say about who's doing us a disservice in Garden State media. And of course, when you watch the show every week, it's quite a few people this week. So you definitely want to stick around for final thoughts. I know it's the summer months, and I didn't go to a barbecue this weekend, but I'm ready to cook later on in the show. But first, ladies and gentlemen, it's not always I have a chance to talk to a distinguished academic. I'm always talking to legislators, candidates, activists, whoever on this program. But you know what? Whenever I get to talk to a fellow academic, I'm always excited. And this week, folks, I'm super excited. He is a distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at my alma mater, Rutgers University in New Brunswick. Folks, he is Professor John Pavlik, joins us here on Real Talk. Professor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on, John. And certainly, folks, if you're not familiar with the School of Communication and Information, obviously, it is a dynamic center of learning at the heart of the Rutgers University New Brunswick campus. I love my days there, walking on College Ave, walking on George Street, walking to Alexander Library at all hours just to study or write papers. Folks, it's an amazing institution there. Founded in 1982, the School of Communication Information's research and teaching focuses on organizational communication, social and new media, library, information science, journalism, media studies, as well as health communications and information technology. The school's competitive and renowned programs prepare students for top careers in today's digital environment. More on Rutgers and the School of Communication a little bit later. But John, certainly, obviously, as fellow academics, at some point, we had that epiphany, getting involved in media at a very young age. I was reading the New York Times. My dad made sure I was reading a newspaper, got as well informed as I possibly could, improve my vocabulary. What was your epiphany back in Wisconsin about, hey, I like media, I'm interested, I think I could make a career out of this?
Well, Fernando, thanks for that question. But I do want to say how much a fan I am of Real Talk. I appreciate you inviting me to be a guest. So thank you. But for me, getting involved in the media and in journalism really began really in my childhood. My grandfather was a newspaper publisher. My
Okay.
father had an electronics business, and my mother was a teacher. And you kind of, you put all three of those things together, and that's, kind of what led me to become interested in studying and teaching journalism and media. And my dad's store electronics, that's the thing that got me interested in new technology, because the field of media has been impacted by technology since its earliest days, really. And so since my involvement beginning in the 1960s and 1970s, advances in electronics and things like that, and then of course computer coming in, and now today's media world with mobile communications and the realm of artificial intelligence and so many other things impacting journalism, media, and society. So that's kind of what brought me into this, and I'm so glad that I focused on that, because it's really, I think, we're in a transformative age in many ways. So I'm delighted that I have something that can contribute to understanding that.
Speaking of transform, that's a great word to segue to our next topic here, because, I think about growing up in the mid to late 90s, really at the birth of the internet, the World Wide Web. Remember, whether I had to decide whether to use Explorer or Netscape, right? And then obviously finishing my undergraduate studies, when I started grad school in the 2000s, I remember, the idea of Wi-Fi, campuses, Wi-Fi classrooms, the notion of, again, we started seeing the birth of social media in 2005 with the Facebook, and then would go on to be Facebook, obviously, certainly YouTube in 2005 as well. As we moved on to the rest of the 2000s, we would see the birth of Twitter, and then Instagram, and then subsequently, whether it was Snapchat, TikTok, and everything else that surfaced from there. It's interesting because when we think about technology, to your point though, John, it's really changed the way we get information, where, I remember growing up in the mid to late 80s where, cable TV was growing and there was only one news channel. It was CNN. It was, that famous James Earl Jones voice. This is CNN, and you're watching it. And that was really sort of the genesis of getting information, as opposed to, hey, it's 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock, CBS, ABC, Fox 5, NBC, and that's it. That's not the case for over 30 years now, actually approaching 40 years, where it's around the clock news, not just on your cable system, but streaming services, on your smartphones. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But it's amazing amount, we talked about off there. Just imagine if Twitter was around during Watergate or during the Iran-Contra hearings. I mean, the way we consume news and get information has changed. I mean, again, to your point, it's just been extremely transformative.
Now, the way we get news and information now is constant, and it's on demand, and it's participatory. So, none of that was the case, before the internet and before mobile communications and before social media. You used to have news that would come out on a published cycle. Newspapers would publish, and broadcasters would have programs at certain times of the day. And, that's how you got your news. And now you're connected and you're getting news. It's like a flow that's just sweeping over you all the time. And people can get overwhelmed with all the news. Sometimes they feel like, well, I need to disconnect. Sometimes the social media is so participatory that people sometimes share things without really even thinking about, is it truthful? So sometimes stuff that's, misinformation, somebody might inadvertently share it, and then it starts to go viral, even though, if you really checked it, if you tried to verify it with some other sources, you might find that that's little dubious information. So, I like the idea of a participatory media system, and I like it on demand. There are a lot of benefits, but there's also a downside in the sense that, it can be overwhelming at times, and it can be sometimes misinformation slips in there, and it might look legitimate, but if you look at it closer, you'd realize, what? They slipped in something to change or to mislead or deceive. And so, it's a double-edged sword, the speed and the participatory nature of social media and sort of the news and media environment we live in.
Absolutely. Folks, it's 6:11 here on the East Coast. If you're just joining us live right now, my guest tonight, distinguished professor at the Rutgers University School of Communication and Information in New Brunswick, John Pavlik, joins us here tonight on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. John, I'm an old school guy. I grew up reading the paper, as you mentioned, obviously your dad was an editor. I'm that guy. I love picking up the paper. I'm a sports nut, so I'm always reading the paper from back to front, sports page first, reading the news. I grew up loving reading tangible newspapers. I still get the Wall Street Journal delivered to me on weekends. There's something about physically reading a paper. I love it. I miss that. That's no longer the case. I can get the Wall Street Journal on my iPad. I can get articles emailed to me at all hours. I can just, again, be on my smartphone. And the days of just, sort of traditional print newspapers and circulation, I mean, it's pretty much almost gone extinct. I mean, obviously, not so much the mainstream papers, but I'll just give you an example. Up here where I live in Hudson County, right near Manhattan, I mean, I grew up with two papers, the Jersey Journal and the Hudson Dispatch, and also the Hudson Reporter. And these are newspapers that I love seeing on the weekends, the op-eds, all the local sports coverage, local high school scores, who the student of the week was. I love that stuff. I still do enjoy reading tangible newspapers, but that just seems to be a bygone era where circulations have suffered, I think, because of technology. And again, I'm not trying to demonize technology. It's sort of become inevitable. But those days of picking up a paper with frequency, though, John, I mean, that's just something, it's become passé.
Well, the printed product, the newspaper, the magazine, those things, even books, there's a lot of value in the printed product. It has a certain, durability, and you can share it. If you're reading the paper and you have a family, you can say, "Hey, you want to look at the sports saves page? I'll look at the politics section or whatever." You can share things, maybe harder to do digitally, but other than weekly newspapers, most of the big newspapers now, most of their readers subscribe digitally. The New York Times, just for as an example, about 10 million subscribers. 9 million of those are digital subscribers. Only about 1 million people still get the printed paper. And, there's some downside to the printed paper. For one thing, it's very expensive to print that, the paper stock, the ink, and the distribution. That's very expensive. Whereas digitally, there's the marginal cost for one more, reader digitally is almost zero. So they can add subscribers. And one thing that's happened is a lot of news media have become less local, more regional, more national, or even global. And they can reach a global audience because digitally it's very easy to do. Whereas with a printed product, that's much harder to do. At the same time, what's happened locally, a lot of communities now don't have a professional journalism presence anymore. They have what are called news deserts. And that's a major problem. Even at a state level, there's not a lot of reporters who spend a lot of time at the State House in New Jersey, for example. And it's kind of true at a lot of states around the country because there aren't the resources to sustain that. It's very expensive. And so that's something that's happened is the advertising, which had been the basic financial backbone for most printed news media. Well, with the rise of the internet, a lot of that went away to the digital platforms. And so now there's still changes happening, but at the same time, it's been a transition for news media to have to develop new funding models that are based on, memberships or subscriptions or foundation support. It's still evolving. Who knows what it'll be in 10 years from now, say. But that has meant they have to be very streamlined in their operation and very efficient. Something I advocate is that for news media to have professional journalists who then work with and encourage citizen reporters, not citizen journalists per se, but citizen reporters, people who can use their smartphone or use social media to help gather information from their communities and share it. And then the professional journalists could be involved in vetting it, making sure it's accurate, making sure that it's, in a form that will really enlighten people rather than just inflame people. So, I think that's part of it is we're still figuring all this out. But I think that journalism, if it can adapt, if it can innovate, we can still have very good local journalism. But we're right now at maybe a turning point where a lot of communities don't have good local professional journalism anymore. But I think there are ways we could reimagine it and bring it back so that it is a vibrant thing.
Speaking about sort of reinventing it, I mean, listen, here in New Jersey, for example, we've seen the rise of tap-intos and patches as news sites at a local level, which I think, especially here in Hudson County, where, institutions like the Hudson Reporter that have been around for more than 30 years, or the Jersey Journal, whose circulation has dropped exponentially, websites like tapinto.net and Patches here in Hudson County have done wonders in terms of, to your point about getting citizen reporters involved, getting sort of local news and getting that fixed. I mean, listen, here in Hudson County, for example, we have great news outlets such as the Hudson County View, also Hudson TV. We have the Jersey City Times. But by and large, again, I think a lot of people have come to rely on, for example, HUDpost, which is very citizen reporting intensive and heavy when it comes to people reporting on their smartphones, and obviously the editors looking to see what they can put out there. But to your point about, hey, the business model has changed. I think it's also, you have to be a little more business savvy. I think you have to be a little more crunch the numbers, crunch the budget a little bit more, as opposed to, hey, this budget of publications and print, outlets are no longer sort of in the majority. I mean, they've become sort of in the minority, to your point, though, John. And here, again, in parts of New Jersey, Bergen County, I know down in Central Jersey and South Jersey, I'm not sure where you reside, but there's like tap intos and Patches all over the state in different municipalities and counties. So I think that's, to your point, I think that's one way where at the local level, we can still get some news without sort of just having to be heavily reliant, let's say, on NJ.com or NorthJersey.com or Insider NJ, which I have my issues with, in terms of their accuracy in reporting. But at the local level, I think they're great resources.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points and very good examples of some quality local journalism that has been created in a digital space. They didn't exist before. Now, because of the way things work with the internet, they can function and function well and contribute something important. But it is also important to note that it's easy for those who want to mislead to create stuff that looks legitimate and isn't legitimate news. Or there's a lot of aggregators, and sometimes what's lost is the original reporting. And I think that's one of the real challenges for a lot of local news media, is to do original local reporting and bring that into the mix, and not just rely on aggregators and things like that for citizens who want to be informed of what's happening. But also I haven't seen this in New Jersey, but it's been playing out across the country. There has been some legal actions taken against local news media that no longer have maybe the means to fight legal battles, that are, people suing them for, threats against privacy or other things. And it's really proving very problematic for local news media because they may not have the resources. When it's one journalist and that's it, maybe two, and then they have to deal with something that's a legal battle, it's really a big problem. And so right now, I think journalism, especially at the local level, is kind of an endangered species in some ways. And I think that anything that can be done to continue to pump new energy into it and resources, whether it's from foundations or other kinds of support, or just the public who gets involved as members, that's all going to be to the good, because it helps not just the journalism, but the journalism acts as the fourth estate, like the fourth branch of government that helps to act as a check on the other three branches, but also just informs the local public with good information, independent, impartial. I think that's something really important in journalism, is the idea of being independent and impartial, so that you're not being paid by someone to report this way or to report that way.
John, the example you just gave right now reminds me of a buddy of mine, and I'm not sure if that was your intent, but my good buddy Charlie Cradaville, the editor of New Brunswick Today, who apparently at the local level is getting some heat, I think, from the local administration. To your point about, like, at the local level, maybe not having the funds to fight a fight like that, where they're being harassed about what they're sharing online or what they're making available, or if they're looking to challenge the establishment, which, again, and shout out to Charlie, he's a buddy of mine, he's been a guest on this show. I wish him well. I know he's going through some tough times right now because of the exact scenario you just painted. So I'm not sure if that was like on purpose, but I was like, that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh my God, John is literally describing Charlie Cradaville, the editor of New Brunswick Today.
Well, it takes a lot of courage when you have to stand up against those kind of powers, where there are deep pockets and threats of lawsuits that really could be they could be the end of your enterprise.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of courage. It's something that journalists have always had, but it's really something that it's important for teaching our students that journalism is a calling. It's not just a job. Obviously, everybody needs a living, and you want it to be a job that does pay a living wage or a living income. But at the same time, it's something that goes beyond that. It's really a calling that you're contributing vital service to our society. But one of the difficulties is a lot of people think local news media should sort of be boosters for their community. And that's a problem because then you won't know whether you're getting legitimate, impartial information or if they're just trying to be a booster for the local community. I mean, certainly everybody wants their local community to thrive, but journalism has to be the thing that's independent. If you can't trust it to be objective as much as possible, obviously we're all human and we all have a point of view, and nobody's going to be perfectly neutral. I try to be neutral when I write in my research. I try to be fair and neutral in my teaching, but obviously we're all human and we do have a point of view, and it's going to come through at times. It's impossible not to. But I think that the public needs to know that it can trust a news site or any other news source as being impartial, that they're not getting something that is just not giving you the full story in order to manipulate the story and manipulate the facts.
John, great point. And speaking about your students, folks, if you're interested in more information about the School of Communication and Information, they're located at 4 Huntington Street in New Brunswick. Contact them at 848-932-7500. Also shoot them an email at sci-info@com with 2 M's, info.rutgers.edu. John, you raise a good point about sort of transparency and sometimes how our views can come out in reporting. We're both academics. I'm also a journalist that does this weekly. And one of the challenges I think that I face, and maybe you've faced it as well, I mean, obviously you're very research intensive. When you're teaching, I mean, I know when I teach in the classroom, I don't bring my political views into the classroom. I don't. You're not going to know who I am in the sense of where I lean, what I'm registered as, what I subscribe to. But one of the challenges I face, though, John, when the semester starts, or all it takes is, hey, after the first day, give out the syllabus. All it takes is one Google search, and students are going to be like, well, all right, well, we know what Dr. Uribe is. He hosts a show on Jersey First TV. He's one of the few unapologetic opinion journalists in New Jersey. I'm not out there, doing man on the street interviews. I'm not doing, to your point, I'm not at the State House reporting on the budget or anything else. I'm an opinion journalist, but I'm one of the few conservative ones in New Jersey that has a reputable program. That I can't escape. I don't make it a point to bring my politics into the classroom. Unfortunately, though, John, some academics don't always cooperate with that. And as someone who studied political science, whether it be in New Brunswick or in Newark at the graduate school, I had so many professors that were so open about how left-wing they were. And there were moments where I had to be kind of quiet or just kind of go along with the program, write a paper a certain way, not ruffle feathers during classroom discussions. I'm not that way as an academic, but I think that in the classroom, we've just sort of seen for decades now that there's been this sort of openness to just be openly left-wing and not apologize for that. You work in communication and media and journalism. It's different than the social sciences. But do you see that with colleagues, or do you have students maybe talk to you and say, hey, listen, so-and-so professor is just too left-wing or right-wing? Do you ever come across those type of challenges?
Well, it's a good question. And I try, like you, I try to be free of political viewpoints when I'm teaching. I also try to be free of political viewpoints when I'm writing for my articles or books. I want the same reason for journalism. I want my students and I want my reader to think that what I'm saying is impartial and has as little bias as possible. And now, I haven't seen colleagues at my program who bring a political agenda per se. So I think I have terrific colleagues, and so I haven't seen that. But I think it could be an issue, certainly in many programs, where if students think that there's a particular agenda that the professor has politically, not the agenda that's in the class. Like you're studying X, Y, or Z subject,
Sure.
but they've got a political agenda that they bring to it. That I think the student would feel as though I can't really trust, what they're saying as being based on evidence or based on research or based on good independent analysis. And I want my students to feel that when I'm talking about the issues that pertain to journalism or media and society, that what they're hearing from me is based on my analysis of what the evidence says. Now, obviously, I do have a point of view and will influence things, but I think one can take steps to try to mitigate that potential bias. And so to not, actively amplify on that, to not do things that would be taking a fact selectively to make a point politically. On the other hand, let's just say a political figure or an elected official takes some action against the press and threatens the press or takes some action that advances what the press can do. I think that those are certainly things that professors should talk about in their class. So, something we talk about with my students a lot is the idea of a shield law, which New Jersey has, but the federal government, we don't have a federal shield law yet. And that's a big problem for journalists. And so, I think there are a lot of issues that can become political, but are certainly important for journalism or media professors to think about, to talk about with their students.
Absolutely. Folks, it's 6:26 here on the East Coast. If you just joined us live, click that share button, folks. Sharing is caring. It takes 2 seconds here. As my guest tonight is a distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University. Big fan of the show, apparently. John Pavlik joins us here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. John, great point before that you mentioned about, again, just sort of like the saturation of information. And, for us growing up, as I mentioned, in the 80s, one cable channel. It got to the point where in the 90s, we started seeing the rise of MSNBC, Fox News. Subsequently, YouTube gave birth to other shows, the Young Turks, Newsmax, conservative, liberal, progressive, right-wing, whatever. And I think we've seen that. I mean, it's almost to the point, though, John. I mean, now it's like an oversaturation where it's news constantly all the time. Case in point about social media. I mean, obviously, these companies have made a point to be smart with their business model, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, featuring stories, links to articles in their stories on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, going live. I mean, it's to the point now where I think it's hard to avoid the news because of this cycle here. I mean, I'm a night owl. At 2 a.m, if I'm doing work or grading or whatever, I just put on my cable. I can either put on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, Newsmax, go to YouTube, whatever. Listen to Joe Rogan, listen to the Young Turks, listen to Tom Hartman. There's no shortage of resources, but the problem is I think now it's almost an oversaturation, though, John. I mean, that's at least how I feel. What say you?
No, I would agree. I think that at times it's just too much. It's like somebody once described, this is back when people were thinking about what was the internet going to be like, and especially with broadband communications, it would be like trying to take a drink out of a fire hose. Yeah. And, I think that's kind of what we've seen now is the flow is tremendous and it's constant. And so sometimes you don't have time to sit back and do a little bit of analysis. I have a colleague at the University of Oregon, Peter Lawfer. I used to work at CNN. He worked at CNN, and he is championing a movement he calls the slow news movement. And he's trying to advocate, and he and I did a paper on this where we talk about the slow news movement, but combining with digital technology, find a happy medium where we can still be engaged with our mobile devices and be connected, but at the same time, slow things down so there's time for reflection. So it isn't just a constant onslaught of information and never any time to think about what it all means, because it's just, you're being pummeled with one bit of news after another. And it intersects with social media, because now young people especially, they get most of their news from social media. They don't go to the actual news site. They just, get it from whatever social media platform they prefer. And so at the same time, research shows that social media use has led to, for a lot of young people, there are sort of mental health problems associated with it. A lot of anxiety. And, I've been taught my first college class in about 1980. Sounds like a long time. long time, I
Not
guess.
really. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but
Maybe it is.
yeah.
It doesn't seem that long to me. But I swear, until the last 5 years or so, I never once had a student who confided in me that they were having some anxiety or some mental health kind of difficulties. And in the last 5 years or so, it's every semester. And I believe that it's that they're having it. And I don't think it's just that they feel more comfortable telling me. I think it's a more frequent phenomenon. And I've talked to colleagues at other universities, and they say the same thing. So I think that there's a real problem for us that's related to, it's not just social media. I don't want to say social media is to blame, but that's a factor, and there are other factors, the political division in our country, the tribalization, all these things, they're all contributing to it, some anxiety and mental health challenges that we have. But at the same time, maybe people are more comfortable talking about mental health. 10, 20 years ago, people didn't probably want to talk openly about mental health. So there are cultural changes as well. But for me, clearly, if there's a way to slow things down a little bit with the news flow, so there's more time for thoughtful reflection and critical analysis, I think we'll all come out ahead.
I'm with you, John. Great points there. And listen, I think the tribalism is on steroids, and it's been like that for some time. I don't like to put the blame on technology and or social media for that. I think there's been some instances where it's been exacerbated because of it, but I would argue that technology has made our lives easier in so many regards. I mean, it's the idea, again, for a lot of my kids, that they don't know what it's like to grow up without the internet or without social media or those dynamics, to where when I was in grad school in the mid to late 2000s, it's, again, Wi-Fi campuses, having a smartphone at all times, being able to look up information as opposed to, well, I got to go to the library on campus. Case in point in Newark at Dana Library. No, I can just go on my phone, whether it's an Android or a Palm Pilot. I'm kind of dating myself a little bit now saying Palm Pilot, but, or an iPhone. And I think that having that information readily available has certainly made our lives easier to some extent. We can shop online. We can buy groceries. We can bank online. Tons of things we couldn't do 10, 20 years ago. But the idea now that I think the way we're getting information, to your point, I think has created some toxicity. I think it's hard to avoid that conversation. And to your point about mental health, it is undoubtedly taking a toll on mental health. Whether it's not just politics, not just like the political climate we live in, because you're right, it's become completely divisive. It's torn up families. It makes Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinners really uncomfortable. Okay, sometimes even watching football on Sundays, or there's a commercial or something. I think that there's been a lot of divisiveness, but I think going back to your point about technology, yes, it's been advantageous, but man, it takes a toll on people, because sometimes you just want to log off and just disconnect completely, and some people struggle with that.
Well, something else that's happened, and this is, again, it's kind of technology, and I'm not trying to blame technology,
Sure.
but it plays a role in developing these echo chambers and these filter bubbles, so that when there was a local newspaper, everybody got the same news in the same order. When there were a couple of newscasts, everybody got the same news in the same order, and we all at least were exposed to the same array of news stories. But now with the internet, and it's not just the internet, it's digital broadcasting, it's all this fragmentation of channels. You can just watch the show you like, and you'll find out about all the stories, but you'll get very different points of view on those stories, very selectively presented by some of the networks and some of the shows. Or you go online and you just tune into your little group and turn out all the other stuff. And so we're not being exposed to the breadth of ideas that newspapers really played a vital role in that regard, in at least making sure that we all sort of saw the same array of stories. Maybe people only read the headlines for a lot of them, but at least we were all aware of these issues. Now, people may be in completely different information silos and never come out.
Absolutely. John, let me ask you this. As a professor of communication and information, teaching media, teaching journalism, I would argue that it's an awful coincidence that with the birth of social media, again, channels such as Facebook, YouTube in the mid-2000s, and then you saw the growth of others, there's been this sort of growing mistrust of media. Not just conservatives like me that rally against like the liberal media in New Jersey, but there seems to be this. It just seems like a coincidence where, to your point about an echo chamber or the talking points of, hey, Americans all across the country have slowly but surely developed some mistrust, not complete distrust, but some mistrust of media, saying, well, you watch NBC, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, you read the Times, you read the Post, Washington Post, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Chicago Tribune, whatever. It just seems like people will say, well, it just leans way to the left. I can't trust them. And people sometimes get hungry for alternatives, maybe some conservative media or just middle of the road media. Is it just a coincidence that just came with technology and social media? Because it seems like more and more Americans, you look at polling, again, I don't have a data in front of me. You're a much more data-driven guy than I am, but it just seems like so many people that I know personally that either agree with me or don't just say, I don't trust the media like I used to. And it's, I don't think there's no coming back from that. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think that there could be coming back in a sense that I think there is possible ways that news media could recapture or rebuild public trust where it's been lost. But it's definitely the case that the surveys show that over the last 50 years, say, trust in journalism, trust in news media has declined significantly. But it's also declined significantly for most institutions in society, whether it's government or religious or, people don't trust anybody anymore, not like the way they used to 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I just finished a historical book looking at the late 19th century, and people trusted newspapers and religion. Those were the two things they trusted in as information sources. And those days are long gone. But trust can be rebuilt. It's not easy and it's slow to happen. And it has to be, deliberate actions had to be taken. I have thoughts on how that could be done. But one thing that is clear is that it's multiple factors, though, that have contributed to the decline. It's partly, the loss of local journalism, local in many communities, but also the perception that many news media are commercial. And a lot of the public now, they see that as a source of bias, that their commercial orientation is a source of bias in how they select stories, how they, apply resources to different stories or where they put those stories on the news. So, people have different reasons why they don't trust. It isn't just because they think it's inaccurate. It's because they think they have a bias for this reason or that reason. So, the trust has definitely dropped a lot over the last 50, even 150 years, if you want to go back to the 19th century. But it's also dropped with a lot of other social institutions. So our society has changed. So it isn't just, journalism that's seen this decline in trust. It's a lot of its social institutions.
John, I got to ask you, as an academic and as someone who's a seasoned, historian, and certainly you do a lot of great research and work about media. I mean, kind of bluntly, though, is there really a left-wing bias in media, not just in New Jersey and nationally?
Well, I don't think that there has tended to be a left-wing bias per se in the news media, but it is true. I think some surveys show that journalists themselves have often been, on the more progressive side of the agenda than on the conservative side, on average. But usually the news media themselves have methodologies in place that have mitigated any potential bias that they might bring so that there be methodologies. It's like a researcher. You have a specific research method that you follow in order so that your own bias doesn't impact the results. You want to make sure that when you're a reporter that you get the accurate facts. You don't want to have your own point of view because we all have a point of view. You don't want to have your point of view wind up distorting the observations that you make, even if you do have maybe a point of view, and if you lean slightly more progressive or more conservative, I think there's ways we can mitigate that. But now media are all over the place. There are news channels that are extremely popular that are very conservative. There are other channels that are much more liberal or progressive, and they're not always necessarily bashful about saying what their point of view is.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think public increasingly recognizes that, but I think there's room for journalism that has less of a point of view. I think there's this, opinion is certainly an important part of news media, but it should just be labeled. I think it's a problem when we start maybe blurring the boundaries between straight factual reporting and opinion. I think that keeping them separate, keeping it identified as this is an opinion versus this is a fact-based report. I think that's the way I would say to go. It's kind of the old school model, but I think it's still a model that makes sense. There's a place for editorializing and offering opinion and thought leadership, but at the same time, we should indicate what it is rather than disguise it, say, as factual reporting, but actually it's opinion reporting.
Well said, John. John, let me ask you, let me pick your brain here. November 7th is coming up in a few months. Not the sexiest of elections in New Jersey. All 120 legislative seats are up for grabs. Certainly at the local level, there are some county races, some municipal races, council seats, things of that nature. But coming up on November 7th, it's sort of an interesting time. The Emperor, I keep calling him the Emperor, but Governor Murphy, I think to some extent, is on the ballot. I think that in parts of Central and South Jersey, there are some vulnerable legislators that have been almost establishment, if not career legislators, in a time where, I say this all the time, there isn't one metric someone's going to give me about New Jersey being affordable. It continues to become unaffordable more and more. I can't say that there's a massive migration. I'm not going to cite data per se where I know people are moving out of New Jersey and New York respectively. Obviously, it's becoming way too expensive to live here, whether it's the gas tax, whether it's property taxes, the highest in the country here. I think Republicans have a chance in some competitive districts in Central and South, not up here. Where I live in Hudson County, it's as blue as Windex. So that's not going to change. Central and South Jersey along the shore, I think this is where Republicans maybe can send a message to Trenton like, hey, we got a lot of lifelong legislators here. Keep voting on these inflated budgets. Spending's out of control. It just seems like, and I don't have any faith in the NJGOP whatsoever. I bash them all the time like I do Democrats in Trenton. It just seems like the wind is at their back. There's a chance to maybe shave into the majorities that Democrats have in Trenton. I'm just nervous that conservatives are going to fumble the ball at the 1 yard line, or they get stopped at, on 4th and goal, when it's an environment that is ripe for anyone to say, listen, look at these establishment Democrats, whether it's the Senate president, the speaker, the governor, that keep pricing New Jerseyans out of the state. I'm just concerned that, getting some seats might not be as easy, and trying to flip the legislature as red as my jacket.
Well, I don't have an opinion on the question of whether the state will shift more blue or more red or more purple. But I do think that you're pointing to the most vital place where journalism can make a contribution in our society, which is to provide insight into elected officials, their performance, their record, candidates for office, their character, their position on the issues. But the thing that's often missing, or there's not as much of it as I would hope there would be, and this is where journalism can do more, I think, is provide more context. So when you see some in development, something that just happened, put it in context so that we can see the bigger picture, so we can understand how it, is playing out over time, to provide historical context, maybe over a 10-year period or a 20-year period, or to put it in context geographically so that we can see how it's playing out in this area versus another region. I think putting things in context can really help people understand and make it less inflammatory, because sometimes it's very easy to put a kind of a sensational spin on it or a headline on it, and it leaves people with an impression, but it may not really be an accurate impression. It might get their attention. And of course, that's the problem. Today's world we live in, there's so much happening all the time. You have to get people's attention, right? Or what's the point of, having your podcast if nobody's listening? So you got to make sure that they tune in, right? But at the same time, to give a little bit of context whenever you can, historical context or geographical context, those kinds of ways, I think really can help advance understanding rather than just, inflaming people's emotions, because we have in many ways too much of that already. If we can calm things down a little bit, maybe a little less emotional and a little more, rational, I think that would help. Then we can have a conversation. It's like my fantasy world is where people across the political aisle actually talk to each other. Yes. Don't shout at each other. They don't try to shout down this side, trying to shout down that side. Instead, have a conversation. Maybe there is a middle ground. Maybe there's some room for compromise. And if we talk,
you said it perfectly. John, you said it perfectly. I mean, the ability to have a dialogue, the ability to talk to other people that, let's say, you don't necessarily agree with, and maybe come to some sort of consensus, or maybe just meet in the middle. I have tons of classmates, from grad school that, they teach in other parts, and they're hardcore liberals. I'm not the most conservative person. I'm center right guy for the most part. But, we talk all the time. We have group chats, and, there are things that we'll argue about, and, it gets heated sometimes, and sometimes we want to just strangle the other right through the phone. But I think, to your point, it's important to try to have a dialogue. And if you can talk to more people you disagree with, I think that's a constructive thing. Not just, again, within the spectrum of journalism. I think in academia, in government, for God's sakes. I mean, it just seems like you mentioned before, the divisiveness. There's a divided government, whether it's here in New Jersey or nationally. Take your pick, whatever legislature, whatever state. I think we're having that for sure. John, before I let you go, you've been a gentleman to be on with me as long as you have, and I appreciate it. Folks, again, as a reminder, the Rutgers University School of Communication and Information at New Brunswick, located at 4 Huntington Street in New Brunswick. You can contact them at 848-932-7500. Of course, shoot them an email, sci-info@rutgers.edu. Of course, some really interesting dynamics here about the school. 1,654 undergraduate majors, both full-time and part-time. Obviously, a wealth of undergraduate minors, master's students, and PhD students. 74 full-time faculty, in addition to 160 part-time faculty. Again, listen, I don't have to try very hard. I brag about Rutgers all the time. I'm as proud of alumnus as there is. John, in your time at the School of Communication and Information, it may be hard to sort of narrow it down to one specific thing, but what are you most proud of in your time as a faculty member there?
Well, I came to Rutgers in 2002, and I have really enjoyed my 21 years at Rutgers. And, I think, if I had to pick one specific thing out of, a very sharp focus, it was, I was the chair of the Department of Journalism and Media Studies. And there was a gentleman who was a native of Jersey City. His name happened to be Flip Wilson. Okay. And he is the first African-American to have full creative control over his television show. This is back at the time when television was like the thing. There wasn't any internet. There wasn't any World Wide Web. There wasn't streaming. There wasn't any of that. Talking back in the 1970s. And Mr. Wilson passed away. And we were able to work, it wasn't just me, but, I, with my colleagues, we were able to work with the estate of Mr. Wilson to get an endowed scholarship for our students. And for more than a decade now, we've been able to fully fund the academic expenses, tuition, books, things like that for a student every year coming out of that endowment from Mr. Flip Wilson, great, New Jersey native. And so in the field of media, what a fantastic man and a pioneer. And he, crossed the so many barriers to get where he got. And then to, come to Rutgers, which is a school that really is committed to diversity and, including everybody and equity, really. And so if I played a small part in helping make a little bit of that happen for our students, that's the thing I'm most proud of, is things that can, what really stands out for me in that story, if I could talk for one more minute about it,
of course,
is at the time, I had done a lot of work with CNN and stuff, and I had a lot of friends in the news media and at AP, Associated Press. And, I thought, this is a big deal. This is a really big deal, getting this Flip Wilson scholarship, right? And so I wrote a news release And I sent it to my colleagues at the AP, and that story went out nationally. It ran all across the country, and I was delighted. Thought, that's fantastic, get some good favorable publicity for Rutgers, and we can bask in the glory of Mr. Flip Wilson. But what really blew me away, because I have a student who's a 5-time champion on Jeopardy. One night I was watching Jeopardy, and there was a question, and the question was, this school has Flip Wilson scholarship in
That's amazing.
That's oh my God, that's from my news release. They made a question for Jeopardy, and the answer was, Rutgers University. And at that moment, I was so proud that we've been able to do that. And every year since then, we've been able to support our students. And I'd like to do more, if we can do more to support our students, because it's so expensive to go to college now.
Yeah.
But, if I had to pick one little thing, that's probably it.
That's amazing, though, John. And God rest is so obviously an amazing contributor to media, and certainly like the legacy he leaves behind, and certainly students that have been able to continue that legacy, I think is just, it's incredible. And I'm glad that obviously came to bear. And obviously, to your point, you had a big part to do with that. So I'm proud of that for you, and certainly ecstatic for you knowing that you had that contribution. That's amazing. John, before I let you go, first of all, I want to thank you for your time. You've been a gentleman. I know you've been on a little bit longer than you would have liked to be on today, but sometimes when I'm having a good conversation with my guests, I just like to keep it going. And you have just provided a wealth of knowledge today to my audience as an academic, as a historian. I think as a regular guy that understands the role of media, its evolution, its transformation. Again, you've been a wealth of information for my audience tonight. Obviously, I think the traffic will speak for itself. Certainly people want to tune in to listen to you today. So I'm just thankful for you and your contributions to media, to journalism, to academia. So again, thank you so much. Best of luck to you. I'll have to make it down to New Brunswick. We have to grab lunch or dinner sometime.
Well, I was thinking maybe what you'd consider doing is maybe come and be a guest in one of my classes sometime. Students would love to have a chance to talk with you. So maybe you'd consider that. John,
you got my contact info. Reach out to me anytime. We can coordinate something and then grab dinner afterwards. I'd love to be down in New Brunswick. But once again, you are just amazing. Best of luck to you. Have a great fall semester. I'll give you the last word here tonight on Real Talk.
Well, I'm delighted that this is going out streaming, and it's the way that people connect in today's world. And so to be a part of the streaming of quality information, I'm not saying me, I'm just saying your show, a quality stream. That's really what it's all about. And to have a chance to contribute to that, I'm delighted. Thank you.
John, God bless you. Folks, he is John Pavlik, distinguished professor at the Rutgers University School of Communication and Information in New Brunswick. He is John Pavlik, joins us here tonight on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. John, God bless you, bro. Talk to you soon. Folks, great interview there with John Pavlik. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in pursuing a career in media, obviously in communications, information, reach out to the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. My alma mater. Love New Brunswick. Folks, I'm wearing red here, for God's sakes, okay? Got my Rutgers stuff here, degrees everywhere. So, I mean, believe me, you won't find a prouder Rutgers alumnus in media, I think, in New Jersey. But again, folks, check them out. Contact them. You can stop by their office at 4 Huntington Street in downtown New Brunswick. Again, contact them 848-932-7500. Once again, 848-932-7500. Of course, shoot me an email, info at COMMInfo, that's COMM, info.rutgers.edu. For more information, check them out at rutgers.edu. Of course, in Brunswick campus, Newark campus, of course, the Camden campus, and of course, also the RBHS Health Campus as well. Folks, an amazing program, and certainly John Pavlik is a wealth of knowledge. I'm thankful for him. Absolutely great segment with him tonight here on Real Talk. Folks, don't go anywhere, because you know what time it is. It's time for final thoughts. And I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, over the weekend, as we are approaching the beginning of the academic year on our college campuses, and coincidentally, a guy who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, State Senator Declan O'Scanlan, coincidentally, who will be my guest next Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. You don't want to miss out on that one, so mark it on your calendars. But I have to tell you, folks, I'm disappointed in my alma mater, Rutgers University. And as a guy who, believe me, has Rutgers gear, wears the cap in the winter, has the Scully when he goes to shovel snow, wears the Rutgers hoodie, folks, I think you know how much I love red. And I love my alma mater. But a practice that the State University of New Jersey continues to engage in, I think is wrong. And I think what's even more wrong is the fact that people who are relying on for information, you know, in the greater sort of media echo chamber in New Jersey, they're just not doing their jobs. Okay? And we all know who's guilty of this. I talk about it all the time. But never in this sort of clutter or compilation. Right? The people that drive me crazy right now in media, you know, are these guys, as I like to call them, the useless eight. And what drives me crazy, though, folks, is that for a story as significant as this, as parents are sending their kids back to campuses, whether it be at Rutgers, TCNJ, FDU, Rider, wherever, folks, okay? But more so at Rutgers University, the State University, a publicly funded university, folks, with your tax dollars, okay? They're not a private university. They're funded with your tax dollars and getting funding from the state budget. And they continue to engage in a practice that is outright awful. And you would think that something of this significance would be front and center on all of our news sites in New Jersey. Take your pick, folks. The New Jersey Monitor, Insider NJ, NJ.com, the Star Ledger, NorthJersey.com, the Bergen Record, Politico. You would think a story like this would be front page news. But of course, when it comes to the useless eight, you know, right behind me, not a peep. Not a peep. Okay? Not a peep whatsoever. And when I think about them, I mean, folks, what infuriates me as a taxpayer, as a homeowner, as an academic, as a journalist, is the idea that a story of this significance isn't being covered. Now, other nonsense is being covered by the aforementioned, which again, and when I think about their journalistic practices or lack thereof, the only thing that comes to mind for me, folks, is the fact that and that's the problem. What we've seen in our New Jersey media echo chamber, folks, are clowns. Because that is what these guys have become now in media. A story as significant as this, okay? And none of them are covering it, okay? And let me go one at a time here, okay? We got Maddie Friedman over there, who if we're lucky, does one story a week, right? Seems to be more enamored with, I don't know, picking up kittens and, you know, being out in public, looking the way he does. I mean, this guy looks like he just left a methadone clinic, for God's sakes. And it's interesting because, you know, for even one time a week he's working, you would think a story like this would be significant, but that's too much work for Maddie Friedman. He's too busy, you know, on his cabin upstate New York, you know, I don't know, scratching a cat or a cat scratching him. Or, for example, Terrence McDonald, who, again, cannot bitch and moan enough how bad he has it in New Jersey as a member of the LGBT community during Pride Month. You would think the New Jersey Monitor would want to cover a story like this, right? No, nothing on the radar, right? But let's sort of go, you know, clockwise. Of course, Tom Moran. Folks, if anyone exemplifies being useless, it's Tom Moran and the Star Ledger and NJ.com. For a story like this, where it's the State University of New Jersey still mandating vaccines for its students and its faculty and staff. You would think that's a serious story. But no, Tom Moran's more concerned about climate hysteria, right? Because climate hysteria is so important to Tommy that he, again, neglects to call out the emperor, Phil Murphy, when he's flying back and forth between Italy and New Jersey on his private jet, which we all know, folks, emits the highest amount of carbon dioxide of any vessel, of any unit that provides transportation. Okay. The highest emitter of CO2 comes from private jets, but you would think that Tommy would have, that word, integrity, that 4-letter word. Seems like everybody on this screen here struggles with that word. All right. But again, Tom Moran would just rather continue with his Trump derangement syndrome than actually talk about a story that's affecting everyday families, students and parents alike. Speaking of Trump derangement syndrome, we have Chucky, we have Charlie Style from the Bergen Record and NordJersey.com, who, a miracle that he left his house last week to go down to the demonstration about parental rights. It's amazing that Chuck left his house. I'm impressed, Chuck. What is that, once every 6 months now? You would think that a guy who's so about the people would be talking about what Rutgers University is doing, but no luck on that one. And speaking about working, how about David Cruz? I was amazed about David actually breaking a story last week. He's been off the whole summer. That's quite a charmed life there. David Cruz pretty much not doing anything during the summer. Oh, wait a minute. Puerto Rican not working? Wow. In the summer? Wow. Breaking news. Water. Wet. I'm surprised to even see David Cruz reporting on something. But you would think a story like this, it would be on David Cruz's radar. Nah, it probably isn't. Probably the only thing on his radar is, I don't know, what bicycle to ride and what to bitch and moan about it. Okay? Or speaking about doing any work, how about Max Pizarro, who rarely leaves his house as well? I'm surprised he even covers a story, creates a power list. But when you're home all the time, you have a lot of disposable minutes, there. So why not create power lists that just glorify a lot of bad people in New Jersey? Or, for example, also, speaking about useless, how about Ali Steinberg? If he's not bitching and moaning about Israel, then I could care less, folks, to be honest with you. I don't care. Or about his Trump derangement syndrome, which I don't care. Or talking about race at every turn. Or virtue signaling. Okay. Or talk about how proud he is about having worked for the EPA, one of the more useless government agencies, or even working at the Meadowlands Commission. Yeah, a lot of good the Meadowlands Commission's done people, folks. You would think a story like this, because he's so about helping the people. And he's so about, making sure that people who are disadvantaged, get a fair shake. Well, where are parents and kids getting a fair shake at Rutgers University with their ridiculous vaccine mandate? Right? You would think you would want some honesty and integrity, but now that's too much work for Ali. Right? Well, I'm not sure if he's watching. It's 7:04. I think it's past his bedtime. So he might watch it tomorrow. The replay. Okay. And speaking about useless, folks, last but not least, how about Jay Lassiter? A guy who pretends to be a journalist, but really is nothing more than a propagandist. And we'll see that on full effect tomorrow, right? As he's hosting a political event for someone who is running to represent New Jersey in the House of Representatives. Folks, the next time Jay Lassiter tells you he's objective about anything, just try to hold your laughter, because I can't. A guy hosting a political event, a fundraiser with other useless people there, Patty Campos Medina, Jerry Inaroni, and the other useless people there, right? And nothing against Sue Altman. She's a nice lady. She just happens to be surrounding herself with really bad people, a lot of intellectually inept people. But again, folks, the useless eight behind me, you would think that they're all about the people. They're all about reporting what's really important in New Jersey. Folks, what's really important in New Jersey right now, again, as we are weeks away from starting the fall 2023 semester at all of our college campuses across this country and across the state. But at my alma mater, Rutgers University, my alma mater, a publicly funded state university, is continuing to engage in draconian measures. Okay? Great story this week here. And I'll just sort of read you a press release from State Senator Declan O'Scanlan. Okay? My guest next week, by the way, talking about Rutgers' ongoing COVID vaccine mandate being ludicrous, which it is. Now, this past week, State Senator Declan O'Scanlan sharply criticized Rutgers University and their ongoing COVID vaccine mandate as being out of step with science, which it is, and logic following the news that Rutgers is continuing to require students to provide proof of immunization from COVID-19 or face possible disenrollment from the school. That's disgraceful. Okay. President Holloway, you should be speaking out about this. You should be talking to the provost and the board of governors and just completely doing away with this policy. You're caving to all this woke nonsense. You're caving to people that clearly don't understand science. And this idea about a new variant coming out, folks, you're going to have to drag me out of this house and send me to jail if you think I'm going to comply with any lockdown or anything else. I'm not vaccinated. I'm never going to be vaccinated. I don't care to be. And more on the aforementioned useless aid about how they looked at vaccines and vax shaming, because we all know they did it, right? I'm not going to comply. Okay, folks, I've survived multiple trips to Las Vegas, to Miami, to Mexico, to the Bahamas, to Jamaica, party in New York City, hooking up at Rutgers in New Brunswick, okay, hooking up with chicks in bathroom stalls at clubs all over New York City. And folks, throughout this entire time, I'm still good. Not because I have this immunity of, Wolverine from the MCU and I'm like have this indestructible immune system. It's not luck, folks. I've taken care of myself. I've also exposed myself to some pretty dangerous things. I'm okay, and so are a lot of you. More on that later. So, of course, the state senator said it's baffling to see that from what should be a leading voice of science-based rationality, because, again, Rutgers University is one of the best science-based public universities in the country, comes arbitrary garbage. We now know for an absolute fact that the COVID vaccine protects nobody except the recipient of the vaccine. Broad-based policies like this should only be enacted with the goal of protecting individuals from someone else's action or inaction. It's not the job of Rutgers University or Governor Murphy. It's the same thing. Emperor, governor, it's the same thing with this guy. Or anyone else to enact a policy to protect me from myself and my own decisions, or for some perceived protection of my own self due to my own decisions. Rutgers was indeed the first university in the nation to require their students to be vaccinated from COVID-19, according to a Rutgers press release. Folks, this is a bad practice. And for a university like Rutgers that prides itself on being a science-based institution of learning, to require students and faculty and everyone else to be vaccinated is disgraceful. It's funny about leftist demonstrators on campus or leftists in our sort of our media institutions in New Jersey, right? That they have a hissy fit about abortion. Oh my God, my body, my choice. Well, guess what? You know what? When people like me that got vilified, that were getting ridiculed, that were getting just having their lives made difficult because I chose to say my body, my choice. Oh no, Fernando's rights don't matter. See, this is the problem, folks, with leftists. They pick and choose when they want to believe in bodily autonomy. Yeah, either believe in it or don't believe in it. But stop talking to both sides of your mouth. And that's what Rutgers is doing. And as much as I love my alma mater, and as much as I wear red and I love wearing all my gear, Rutgers is wrong. They're wrong. President Holloway is wrong by not getting rid of this policy. And stop caving to all these leftist woke nonsense fools that somehow never took a science course, right? Never took a biology course, right? Because we all know how they believe, nonsense about biology. But folks, now more than ever, we know the vaccine didn't protect anybody. It just didn't. I'm not getting vaccinated. You're going to have to drag me out of my house and take me to jail to vaccinate me. I said that back in 2020, in 2021. And guess what? I'm still here. Never got dragged to jail, and I'm never going to get vaccinated because I don't need it. And so do many others that feel they don't need it either. For Rutgers to do this is wrong. I love you, Rutgers. You're my heart and soul. I wear red all the time. I love everything about Rutgers University. I watch Rutgers basketball games. I'll go to games. I'll buy merch. I love my alma mater. But you're wrong. Doing this to students, doing this to their parents, forcing them to take a vaccine that we all know doesn't work and is experimental and has caused harm to people. We're seeing the data. The FDA and the CDC were even saying that they even inflated numbers about COVID-19. But Rutgers University chooses to enforce this ridiculous mandate. I'm looking forward to talking to State Senator Declan O'Scanlan next week. because what Rutgers is doing is wrong. What they're doing is tyrannical. What they're doing is draconian. Okay? And once again, to sort of cite, as I mentioned before, to cite the useless 8, the inept 8, as I like to call them, who, folks, were the first ones to lecture you and tell you about, oh, you need to get vaccinated and we need to vaccinate people because we need to, folks, these were the same clowns that would easily want to vilify you, me, and anyone else who didn't want to get vaccinated, who want to make our lives in the workplace as uncomfortable as possible, to shame us, to say, hey, we shouldn't be out there without everybody else. No. These clowns were the first ones, and they still do it all the time now, whether they publish their articles about, oh, reproductive rights, my body, my choice. Folks, when I hear these clowns talk about body autonomy and talk about my body, my choice, the only thing that comes to mind, really, when I think about these 8 guys is this. Folks, shame on these guys. Shame on Matt Friedman. Shame on Terrence McDonald. Shame on Tom Moran. Shame on Charles Style. Shame on David Cruz. Shame on Max Pizarro. Shame on Jay Lassiter. And shame on Alan Steinberg. You should be writing about this. You should be writing columns saying Rutgers University is wrong for mandating a vaccine that we all know, folks, isn't working. And to do this and to just sort of gloss over it and continue with your ridiculous left-wing agenda, all the woke nonsense, all the social justice buffoonery and clownery that all 8 of you engage in, you should be ashamed of yourselves. But then again, that will require the inept 8 to have shame to begin with. And we all know that when it comes to, these 8, they don't have integrity, and they certainly have no shame. Folks, it's tragic. What Rutgers is doing right now is wrong. What they're doing to kids is wrong. Forcing and mandating a vaccine that we all know isn't working and is causing harm to people. I hate to tell you, it's a bad decision by Rutgers. It's an even worse decision by these clowns to not talk about it nonstop and put pressure on Rutgers. You know what's funny? They like to put pressure on people and institutions when it suits them. My body, my choice. Remember that, guys? Yeah, when it suits you and your nonsensical narratives. Folks, I'll tell you, if anyone's doing a disservice to journalism, now more than ever, the inept 8 right behind me. And that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank the distinguished professor at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University, John Pavlik. Great conversation with him. Folks, make sure you always check out our social media. Make sure you like us on Facebook, Jersey First, as well as Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Also, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter, as well as my own Instagram and Twitter. And also subscribe to the YouTube page for Jersey First. Of course, get all our great content there. Wherever you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First and take it with you all throughout the summer months. And folks, I cannot say it enough. Always remember the news site in New Jersey that's always educating and advocating for the people of New Jersey. It's always Jersey First TV. New episodes air every Thursday of The Nader Narrative with the incredible Elizabeth Nader, and brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap with the amazing AJ Malilo and Stephen Rombolo air every Thursday. And, of course, every Monday night, live at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, you can check out Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Folks, special programming note, next Monday night again, you definitely want to tune in. Mark it on your calendars. State Senator Declan O'Scanlan will join me live here on the show. We'll talk about what Rutgers is doing wrong with their vaccine mandates and much more. Folks, you don't want to miss it out. Next week, next Monday night, live here as we wrap up the month of August. Folks, great traffic. But, of course, why are you surprised? It's always great traffic here on Jersey First TV and, of course, always on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Always remember, folks, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always Real Talk right here with Jersey First TV. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 50 Latino as voted on by the Latino Spirit Online magazine, certainly the weapon of mass disruption in Garden State media, without a doubt, the people's choice and the people's voice. Yes, it's me, Fernando, Uribe. Folks, have a great rest of your Monday. Please party responsibly, of course, as we're finishing up the summer months here. And always remember, if you can't be good, be bad, baby. We'll see you next week here on Jersey First TV.